I'm a 28-year-old man living in New York City, working as a graphic designer. I come from a small town in Arkansas, where my parents still live. I decided to take a break from the hustle and bustle of city life and visit my parents for a few weeks. Little did I know that my trip would turn into an unforgettable experience and, frankly, a freaking nightmare. I had been staying with my parents for a few days, and things were starting to get a little tense. My dad kept telling me to get a real job, and my mom wouldn't stop talking about her church group and the dangers of marijuana on today's youth. As a somewhat sane, rational human being, I needed to get out of there before I said something to my parents that I would later regret. I loved my parents deeply, but after that trip, my visits with them lasted no more than a week. I find they're much easier to love in the small doses. Anyway, I needed to get out of there to maintain my sanity, so I decided to go for a hike in the nearby mountains. Growing up in Arkansas, I was constantly playing around in the woods, hiking and camping, but admittedly, having lived in New York for a while, my outdoorsy side had dwindled significantly since my childhood. I was totally unprepared, brought nothing but a water bottle, and should have taken a deep breath before rushing out of the house. A couple of minutes of preparation goes a long way when you're venturing into the unknown. Anyway, I had been hiking for a while, enjoying the fresh air and the beauty of the wilderness, but then I saw something that seriously freaked me out. There was this insane, humongous creature in the woods, sleeping peacefully and snoring loudly. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The creature was bigger than a bear, with a huge body, fat legs, thick black shaggy hair, and giant horns. I had never seen anything like it before. The sound of its snore was quite bizarre. For its size, it didn't make a very deep sound. It was more of a strange rattling sound. It was as if I was hearing multiple creatures snoring at once. It sounded almost demonic, and I will never forget the sound that thing made. In hindsight, I should have just gotten out of there then. That thing could have easily mauled me if it really wanted to. But I was mesmerized by the creature, and I couldn't help but get closer to get a better look at it. The closer I got to the creature, the more I could hear its crazy-sounding snore echo through the forest. It was fascinating, but also terrifying at the same time. As I mentioned, I was completely unprepared to be that deep in the woods, especially around a creature like this. I didn't have my cell phone on me, and as a New Yorker, I didn't own any guns. I will admit, being this close to the creature has made me rethink this, and I've been seriously considering getting a shotgun or the next time I go wandering through the woods. I had to tell someone about what I had seen, so I rushed back to my car to head back to my parents' house. My mind was racing on the way there, going through all the possibilities of what I could have seen. It wasn't a bear because it had giant horns. It wasn't a deer or moose or anything like that. It was far too large and could probably devour a deer in one sitting. I knew that what I had seen was something out of the ordinary, and I was grateful I didn't wake it up. If I had, who knows what could have happened. I got back to the house, ran inside, and told my parents about the creature I had seen. I should have known the reaction wasn't going to be particularly supportive, but they both really made me angry. My dad just laughed at me and made several comments about my intellect. My mom accused me of smoking the devil's lettuce and pleaded with me to cleanse my sins and confess at her church. No matter how much I insisted that I was telling the truth, it just made things worse. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the creature I had seen. I knew I had to go back and get a better look, even though it was risky. The next morning, I packed my cell phone, some gear, a camera, and my dad's gun, just in case I would need it. I was much more prepared this time, and I headed back to the mountains. As I got closer to the spot where I'd seen the creature, I started freaking out. What if it was awake this time? What if it was aggressive? What if there was more than one? Was this a suicide mission? I tried to calm myself down, but my imagination was running wild. I finally made it back to the spot, and the creature was no longer there. I was relieved for my safety, but my curious side was disappointed. At the very least, I wanted to snap a picture of the thing so I could show people. Can you imagine how awesome it would be to take a selfie with an unknown beast in the background? Talk about going viral. I eventually left my parents' house and made the long trek back home. As soon as I got there, I started searching online for anything I could find that was like the experience I had. I just knew I couldn't have been the only person in the world to see a creature that big and impressive. After reading for an extensive period of time, I discovered that what I saw could be what they call the Ozark howler. There were sightings of this beast in Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. The description definitely matched what I saw. It felt good to know that I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. I'm an expert with an animal science background. I had been studying several years in the field of zoology. Mostly, I was interested in studies about reptiles. I had several types of lizards and snakes, so my interest in these types of creatures was quite overwhelming to some. It was hard to keep friends and romantic partners because they seemed very disturbed by it all. Of course, this was decades ago, so I'm sure it's a bit different these days. Anyway, I had several colleagues that wanted to do a research paper on reptiles native to the Everglades. More specifically, we were really wanting to understand the decreasing population of the Florida soft-shelled turtle, and if it was an issue involving urbanization. So we all had flew off to Florida. I had never been to the Everglades before, but I've always wanted to go because of the vast wildlife. It was more humid there than I had anticipated, but I was also from a very dry climate, and reptiles absolutely love the humidity. I don't know why I was so shocked. I suppose it was because I was used to the humidity being enclosed in a terrarium as opposed to it around me. It was refreshing though. Being near an ocean and being able to smell the organic scent of animals, it was like heaven. I know plenty of people would be grossed out by this, but not me. I loved it. In fact, I really considered moving there prior to the frightful events I'm about to describe to you. We had spent one night already. We had just landed in Florida, so we went straight to the hotel and slept. That morning, we got up, packed our equipment, and headed towards the Everglades. I was told very often by hotel workers, our driver, etc., that we might see an alligator in the road. I was terribly disappointed when we didn't see any. There was a vast amount of wooded area just heading toward the Everglades. My mind really considered how many species of reptiles could be in those woods that hadn't been discovered yet. I couldn't help but feel excited. Finding a new species of turtle would be very beneficial for me and my team, but I knew we had other work to do. We really needed to put our focus on the soft-shelled turtles. Once we got to the outskirts, it was pretty much a quick transition onto fanboat, something I had never seen or heard before in my life. It was a little scary because it was literally a flat piece of material attached to a fan. There were no sides whatsoever, and though I loved reptiles, I really didn't want to be gator bait. People think that because I love these creatures, it makes me immune to fear. Really, I know so much about them that it frightens me to think of what would happen if I ever got into a tangle with them. Anyway, the captain of the boat assured us that we'd be fine, that the boat was more safe than it looked. They asked us if we'd ever been in the area before. None of us had, but they said that it was amazing, the environment and the things you'd see. I wasn't crazy about our mode of transportation, but they were right. It was beautiful. I was awestruck almost immediately. The first day in the Everglades was really supposed to be more like a tour. One of my colleagues wanted to get video footage, so they held out their camcorder and started taking some clips of us riding across the swamp waters. I was looking out towards the waters. I knew that the soft-shelled turtles would most likely be seen poking their heads out from time to time rather than roaming the land. We started to get to the thick of it. We were surrounded by strange types of flora. The captain said that they knew plenty of them. He started chattering off names like bald cypress and sawgrass, and we had even seen some orchids and bromeliads. It was quite a treat. Just as we were getting comfortable, I started to notice an unusual scent. It smelled awful, like sulfur and BO. And first, I thought it might have been one of my crewmates, but after it lingered for a minute, one of my colleagues said, "Whoa, what's that awful smell?" I noticed the captain at this time started to look a bit worried, and they said, "Hey, it's getting pretty close to sundown, so we need to turn around." But it wasn't getting close to sundown. It was only 3 p.m., so one of our leads started to get a bit fussy. The captain responded, "I'm happy to bring you all back tomorrow, but right now, we must leave." My colleague who was taking video clips started whacking me on the shoulder. I was very frustrated, so I turned around and snapped at them. That's when I realized they were pointing out towards the bald cypress, or that's what I think it was. Off in the distance was a strange, orange-brown creature. It was walking through the trees and swamp with no difficulty at all, and before we knew it, it was gone. I thought we had something. It might not have been a turtle, but it was something. But the captain assured us that it was not safe, that we needed to leave. So we left. On the way back, the captain told us about what we had seen. They knew it, and they were terrified of it. And that's when we heard the unsettling noise, that howl. And since then, I've been terrified of the Everglades. We didn't even go back for our paper. And as far as my colleague who was recording the things we saw, they had been so scared that they dropped the camera into the swamp. What had we seen? The captain seemed to know, but all I can say is that it was very large. It walked upright, and it smelled foul. So, I've been a nurse for a while, almost 10 years now. If I knew everything then that I know now about what it takes to be a nurse, I'm not sure I would have signed up to do it. But now, I wouldn't trade it for anything in the world. I've got to travel all around, meet all kinds of amazing people, and every day is another interesting story to tell. It can be a little much at times, though. There is this one nursing home I worked at a couple of years ago, and the experiences I had there are something I think about every day. Anyone who doesn't believe in the supernatural should work up at this place for a week and let me know if they're still skeptical. It was seriously messed up. It was a beautiful, old, historic facility in New England, and the residents were lovely people at first. They were so gracious and they made me feel like I was really making a difference in their lives. It was like I was a part of their family, and I looked forward to coming to work and seeing everybody. But then, some seriously strange things started happening around the facility. At first, it was just small things. Every once in a while, I would hear laughing or crying in the hallway when nobody was there. There were some of the residents that would stare at things that weren't there, or talk to someone who would regularly visit them, even though there was nobody there. Naturally, the residents are all older, and many of them have dementia, so I didn't think anything of it. But all of them would openly talk about the spirits that they interacted with that day, and it became impossible to ignore. I would hear disembodied whispers in empty rooms, and even in the parking lot when I was walking to my car. Doors would open and slam closed by themselves, and it got to the point where we would regularly discuss our paranormal experiences at the staff meetings. I suggested that a priest should come and cleanse the place regularly, but due to protocol, we weren't allowed to impose religious beliefs on the residents. One night, while doing my rounds, I heard this bizarre chanting coming from one of the rooms. I peeked around the corner, and there was a group of 5 residents huddled together and chanting in a language that I couldn't understand. It seemed like it might have been Latin or something, but it freaked me out, and I just got away from them. As time went on, there were more and more incidents like this, and the residents would be more and more open about their occult practices. They would paint symbols on the walls, wear matching cloaks, hold secret meetings in their rooms at night, etc. It got to the point where we had to make rules and enforce them. No occult practices, no vandalism, lights out at 10 o'clock, etc. It started to take a serious mental toll on all of us, and it seemed like we were fighting a losing battle. More and more of the residents would exhibit suspicious behavior and sneak around to do God knows what in their rooms. One night, I was checking on this lady, and I saw a dark figure appear in the corner of her room. I started staring at it, thinking it was my mind playing tricks on me, but the outlines started to look more and more human. I asked her if she saw anything in the corner, and she calmly stated that he visits her every night to let her know that her time is drawing close. Then she looked at me right in my eyes and said that he said I was next if I didn't get the hell out of there. I tried to act calm, but I was sick to my stomach, and I got out as quickly as possible. The woman ended up dying shortly afterward. One night, I was doing my rounds when I heard a blood-curdling scream coming from one of the residents' rooms. I ran to see what was going on, and I found one of the residents lying on the floor, convulsing and foaming at the mouth. I rushed to help her. When the lights shut off and the door slammed, I was absolutely panicking, and I felt my way over to the bed and pushed the call button to get some assistance. I heard heavy footsteps from inside the room and an awful, breathy groan coming from a corner of the room, not from the poor woman writhing around on the floor. It didn't sound human, and I was absolutely terrified. Finally, the door opened, and a team of nurses turned on the light and rushed to help the poor woman. The woman ended up passing, and I had to run outside to collect myself. It was the most freaked out I had ever been in my entire life. Some of my fellow staff mates and I began to suspect that some members of the staff were joining the residents and participating in the rituals with them. They would claim to be working and routinely disappear for a while, and then show back up, acting strangely. It got to the point where I couldn't work there anymore. I wouldn't be able to sleep at night. I would see dark figures at my home and everywhere I went. It really began to affect my mental health, and I was constantly living in fear. I finally got transferred, and I always felt guilty that I abandoned those poor residents who considered me family. They deserved to live out their final years in peace, but instead, they were living in what felt like a portal to hell. As guilty as I still feel today, I'm also relieved that I was able to get out of there. I haven't dealt with anything like that since I left. Now, when I talk about the unknown forces of life with others, it's typically in a positive light. My patients and I will talk about how when you die, you go to a better place, and you get to see the people you loved during this lifetime. I don't know for sure what happens after we pass on, but I know I'm grateful. I don't have to live constantly in fear anymore. I hope that facility in New England has changed since I've been gone. But every time I think about it, it creeps me out. If I had stayed any longer, I wonder how differently my life would have turned out.